Okay, we're rolling.
This is an interview at the Division of Military Naval Affairs Headquarters, Latham, New York, the 29th of December 2003, approximately 12:45 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My full name is Mark Robert Furman, F-U-R-M-A-N. I was born October the 28th, 1948, in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Beaver Dam, located 43 miles northwest of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay.
The son of Gordon Edward Furman, who was born in Fond du Lac, also commonly known as Foot of the Lake. And he was the son of George Furman. And George Furman's, some of his descendants had come out of Canada but hopped over from England. Grandpa George Furman married a lady named Rose Ferguson, whose parents came from Ireland. And so when I was just a little boy, I'd say, "Oh, hi, Grandpa George. Hi, Grandma Rose." Yeah.
Okay. Before you entered service, what was your military or your educational background?
I just had a general diploma, graduating from the Towson Senior High School in Baltimore, Maryland. I was living with my parents in Towson, Maryland, and just got a general diploma. And my graduation date was June 6, 1966. 6/6/66. And then it was my fond desire to continue on to college. So the following fall, I went to the University of Baltimore with hopes of getting a 4-year degree in psychology. And forgive me for saying this, but I did a lot of stupid things, cutting out of classes and everything, and I ended up being there for less than a semester.
Did you, were you drafted or did you enlist?
Then, yeah, it was the following summer that I ended up getting a draft card for the U.S. Army. So, just to share with you, shall I read my entire?
Well, that's up to you. How
The entire
you
thing?
want to do it.
Yeah, I joined the U.S. Army in the fall of 1967. I went through basic combat training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. P-O-L-K, Fort Polk, Louisiana, graduating with the rank of E2 as an enlisted man. Then, arriving at Fort Walters, Texas, for primary helicopter school, I became a warrant officer candidate. And my money went up to E5 pay, which was a nice jump in money.
Was that primary school more difficult than basic training?
It was just different.
A lot of harassment?
And all of us in formations marching around, the place, and I did have a problem when I ran out of fuel once with that TH-55, because evidently the gas cap was on incorrectly or something, and gas was pouring out of the back of that thing, and all of a sudden, boom, out of fuel, and I just was able to flare and land and put that TH-55, called the Hughes 269, into a field. And then I climbed out and just stood there, and boop, all of a sudden a Huey was flying by, and I jumped up and down and waved to them, Ooh, what's happened there? So they came down and landed and hopped me in, and then they got another helicopter out there to bring the TH-55 back in. I was successful in completing my training there at Fort Walters, Texas, and then I went back to Baltimore just to stay with my parents for a little while, and then hopped down to Fort Rucker, Alabama, flying the D and H model helicopters, and also receiving instrument training in a Bell 47. it was, in the fall of 68 that on one day they pinned down our warrant officer bars, W01, and the next day we got our wings, our set of silver wings. Then back to Baltimore for visiting for a little while, and then off to Vietnam in November of '68.
Now, let me just stop you for a second. How long was your schooling to be a pilot? Was that a year course, 6-month course? Or?
It was all of those things were done in over a year. Mm-hmm. One of the things was that when I went to Fort Walters, that they had so many people who were waiting to go through the training that it was almost for I think 2 or 3 months that we were all living in barracks at the bottom of the hill instead of being up in the specific locations, and we were just down there in a bunch of old World War II style barracks, waiting for the darn thing to start. Mm-hmm. But eventually got to go up to the hill, and I was part of the 6th walk, the 6th Warrant Officer Candidate Company. 6th walk is what we were called.
Did you find the training adequate, or were they just trying to push people through to fill a quota of the number of pilots they needed?
I think the training was very well done.
Uh-huh.
Riding, with the chief warrant officers and being a warrant officer candidate and having them, teaching me all the tricks. Mm-hmm. They did a really good job. Now, just to share with you, I served one tour of duty in Vietnam. Arriving there in November of '68, ending up at this replacement depot, but all of a sudden a captain came in and grabbed the two of us and took us up to where B Troop and Charlie Troop of 3rd of the 17th Air Cavalry were in Dongtam. And I ended up being assigned to B Troop, which our call sign was Burning Stogies. My buddy ended up in Charlie Horse, which was the nickname for Charlie Troop, mm-hmm. Charlie Horse. And A Troop was called the Silver Spurs, but neither one of us were being assigned to that. During the 10.5 months that I was in Vietnam, it was in March of '69 when I got shot in the posterior the first time by a phosphorus round. An enemy soldier jumped out of a bunker, put about 12 rounds in my OH-6 helicopter, and one round hit me in the posterior, and it was a phosphorus round, and it was hot. Another round went between my legs, hit the wires that went up to my cyclic, and cut the wires. And I was trying to call the Cobra. I was at 50 feet off the deck, and the Cobra circling around at 12 to 1,500 feet, and I couldn't speak. So I hopped out behind the infantry, sat the helicopter down, jumped out, and looked it over just to see if it was still flyable. And it was acceptable. It was still flyable.
Were you in a great deal of pain at that point?
And I had blood, running out of my posterior, running down my thigh, left side. But when I jumped back in the helicopter, I swapped cords and then reached over and hit the cyclic on the left side where my scout observer was sitting, mm-hmm. and told the Cobra, that I had been shot, I had been wounded. Can we get another team out here? And I need to get into a hospital. And fortunately, there was another Cobra and Loach that was just a few miles away. The one Cobra called the other one, and they came over to then go back on the go back on the attack, while I ended up flying back to Dongtam, landing my helicopter, and then getting into the hospital to get that wound fixed. I had my major shoot down 10.5 months in country. We were down in the Plain of Reeds. There were 2 enemy soldiers who crawled out of some sleeping positions. I had a brand new scout observer in the left seat. His name was Hall. His last name was Hall. And I was teaching him, how to use the CAR-15, Colt automatic rifle. And we found one enemy soldier hiding under a bunch of grass, and his legs were, just sticking out, but they were underwater also. And I just said, Hall, squeeze the trigger until it doesn't work anymore. And he just emptied the full clip into that enemy soldier. Then we went looking for the other soldier, and we kept circling around. It's very sad, but I was about 50 feet off the deck. I had slowed down looking for this guy when all of a sudden he jumped up out of a rice paddy out the right rear, and he was no more than, I think, 150 feet away, and he emptied his entire AK-47 into my helicopter. Many rounds hitting the Kevlar plate on the back of my seat and taking big chunks out of it, and then rounds came through, and I took a round through the left forearm, which shattered the radius. And as you can see, I still can't get full pronation on the left side because of that one round that went through and shattered the radius of my left arm. I got hit in the rear end again. A round entered and left about 5 inches away. When my helicopter crashed, my helmet flipped off, and I cracked my head on the side panel, and then all of a sudden blood was rolling out of my forehead, my entire body turning red in blood. The enemy soldier was walking over to finish us off. But by the grace of God and the fact that we had another loach in the area, the Cobra that was circling above both of us just screamed out, 19's down, get over there right away. And that other loach was over there within, I think, a minute, and he was able to stop the enemy soldier, made him throw his weapon down, told him to back up. The Huey helicopter that was up at $3,000 started circling down, and one of the enlisted guys in that helicopter ran out and grabbed that soldier, tied him up, and threw him in the Huey, and got him the heck out of there. In the meanwhile, the scout observer, whose name was Mike Hall, and also to share with you, my nickname in Vietnam was Rocket J Squirrel. Rocket J. Hey, I'm Rocket J Squirrel. And the nicknames, many of us had nicknames in the Cav troop. My 2 top left seat guys were Mad Dog and Duck. Larry Duck Simpson and Lynn Mad Dog Swearingen. We just had these goofy nicknames. But as I kept telling people, me with the nickname of Rocket J Squirrel Furman.
Now, what happened to the observer that was with you?
Fortunately, he was totally unhurt. Even though several rounds hit the back of his plate, they didn't come through, and they didn't get him. He was totally unhurt. Now, with my posterior being wounded again, with blood running out of 2 locations, both sides of my left forearm, and running out of my forehead, the observer who had loaded me into that other 086, and we took off over Gross in that 086 with 4 of us on board. He took off his calf scarf, and wrapped it around my forearm to try to stop the bleeding there. He took his t-shirt off, told me to drop trousers, and he tied off my posterior to try to stop the bleeding there, and he grabbed a bandage behind the ammo box and put it on my forehead. And with the reduction of all that blood that was running out, which I was under the assumption that I was probably going to be dead before we got into, they were able to hop me into the 3rd Field Hospital in Saigon, the 3rd Field Hospital, Army Hospital, got me in there in 17 minutes. And I staggered out of that thing, gave him a little wave, and the 2 medical guys helped me in, and they put just a numerous amount of stitches and got me all stitched up and repaired. I ended up only spending 1 week in the 3rd Field Hospital, but then I was sent to Camp Zama, Japan, and I was there for 2 weeks. Then I got on one of those big Freedom birds and was flown back to the States and landed at Andrews Air Force Base near Washington, D.C. When I walked out of that huge Air Force bird, I saw an Army ambulance, and an enlisted man came running up to me, and he said, "Sir, they sent me down here to get you to take you up to Fort Meade, Maryland, to Kimbrough Army Hospital." Oh, okay. So I ended up spending a bunch of time there at Kimbrough Army Hospital, and then it wasn't long before they pulled all of those stitches out, and I was totally recovered. My follow-on assignment was at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. I was able to go up there, and I flew A, B, C, D, H, and M model Hueys, OH-58s, OH-6s, and they also had a flying club at the airfield with a couple of Cessna 172s, and I joined the flying club and got the add-on ratings flying civilian aircraft. Did that. So I was at Aberdeen for several years. I was only at Aberdeen for a couple of months, and I just made CW2, Chief Warrant Officer, when all of a sudden, in the mail, I got a package. That package had promotion to First Lieutenant, Armor Branch. First Lieutenant, Armor Branch. Based upon the awards and decorations that I had rolled up by putting myself at risk in Vietnam. These included 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 2 Air Medals for Valor, the Air Medal with 39 oak leaf clusters, just rolling up all that 1,000 hours of time, the Bronze Star for Meritorious Service, 2 Purple Hearts, and an Army Commendation Medal. I received all of those awards and decorations for serving as a 20-year-old helicopter pilot in Vietnam. Now being assigned to Aberdeen Proving Ground and receiving that direct commission, I made 2 phone calls. I called the armor branch. They said, by the way, you're going to make captain in 1 year, and you're going to go off through the Armor Officer Basic course maybe in a year and a half. So I ended up getting my captain bars in 1 year, and then going off to Kentucky, to Fort Knox in that vicinity, to go through the Armor Officer Basic course. My follow-on assignment, it was my fond desire to stay right there at that airfield and just fly the helicopters. But unfortunately, they were totally filled up, and I was then assigned to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, as a range inspector. I was assistant BCT committee group coordinator, going out and just doing range inspections while all of the guys were doing their shooting and their crawling under the barbed wire and whacking each other with pugil sticks, doing all that kind of stuff. Then the next sad part of the story is that Richard Nixon bounced 23,000 of us off of active duty. It was my fond desire to continue and do 20 years. I'd been promoted to captain, and I thought, if I can do a 20-year retirement, I could go out as a lieutenant colonel and then go get a follow-on job. But Richard Nixon bounced 23,000 of us off of active duty in '73. He said, "Don't need you. We'll call you next war." And as you two gentlemen are probably aware, North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam in '75, killing hundreds of thousands of people and taking over the entire country. From 1973 to 1989, being bounced off of active duty and making almost $24,000 a year as an Army captain, which in those days was a tremendous amount of money, going to half that money as a GS-7 aircraft dispatcher up in Petersburg, Virginia. Now, while I was there, I was giving flight instruction evenings and weekends, a lot of CFI time. And several years later, I was able to hop up to Newburgh, to Stewart Airport, Stewart International, and I jumped up over $30,000 in salary coming in because I jumped up to a GS-12 instructor pilot position. Unfortunately, 10 years after being out of Vietnam, because of ingestion of Agent Orange, I had a tumor growing up and down my spine, and I came down with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I thought that I was going to die. I immediately went to a doctor who checked me out. He hit me with 5 weeks of radiation therapy to kill that tumor. Then follow-on was to go for 6 months down to West Point, where Colonel Trainer, the top flight surgeon down there, kept giving me chemotherapy, giving me shots every 2 weeks. At the end of the 5th month, I went down there and he said, "Mark, you're perfectly fine. You're perfectly, totally recovered. I'm not going to do a 6th month of chemotherapy on you." Thank God, by the grace of God, that I was perfectly fine at that point. Ended up moving from Stewart Airport up to living in Fayetteville, New York, but running my own flight facility out at Hancock Airport near Syracuse, and my own facility for a bunch of years. Had a lot of great pilots that would hop in from all the surrounding counties, and had a good staff there. And then all of a sudden, at one point, they decided to shut us down, turn our assets over to the National Guard, and just close us out. Some of the people ended up putting in for retirement. I ended up calling a buddy of mine who at one time was the maintenance officer down at Stewart Airport while I was an instructor pilot giving tons of check rides. And his name was Fred Leonelli. I chatted with Fred, and he was now the assistant division manager with the FAA. And he said, "Mark, how about a job with the FAA?" Terrific, because they're shutting down my facility here. I said, what do you have? And he said, "We have 3 openings out here on Long Island, and we have 5 openings up in Albany." And I said, "Freddie, I'd like to go to Albany." Just to share with you, I transferred to the FAA in February of 1989 with assignment to an aviation safety inspector position in Albany, New York. I was promoted to Principal Operations Inspector, POI, 9 months later, with certificate responsibility for Part 135 operations, the designated pilot examiner program, and providing training for new inspectors. When the safety program manager retired, I visited the office manager and I was given the job. He gave me the safety job. Robert Martin was the name of the first manager of the office. In 1990, I was honored with the organization's Special Achievement Commendation and again in 1992 with an On-the-Spot Award. In 94, I received a Regional Star Award for Class Act and Value Added service. I also received an FAA Outstanding Performance Rating in 1995. I had developed over 100 PowerPoint presentations that were being used nationwide in the aviation safety program. While I was with the FAA, I actually hopped down to the 1062nd Reserve Training Unit in Albany, rose to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, and doing training as an Army Reserve Colonel with them, and even attended yet another class down at Fort Rucker. Right now, gentlemen, I have rolled up 36 years of government service. And as my desire to continue to run the safety program for 4 more years, and then go out of the government with the 40-year, hopefully, maximum retirement. And by the way, just to share with you, I never did get a full 4-year degree. I received a associate in science degree in liberal studies from the University of the State of New York in 1982. I got a 2-year degree. I didn't get the 4-year, never got the 4-year degree.
Did you use the GI Bill at all for that, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have to say that concludes my presentation of my just under 6 years of active military service. 5 years, 11 months, I think it was 23 days or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just shy of 6 years of active duty. And then 16 years as a Department of the Army Civilian Army Reserve technician, and all the rest FAA time.
During your time in Vietnam, what would you say most of your helicopter flights, the mission of most of your helicopter flights was?
When I first arrived with B Troop, they popped me into the front seat of the Cobra, a Cobra gunship. At the end of 4 months, I had rolled up 350 hours in the front seat of that Cobra. The back seat guys allowed me to fly from the front seat. Also, many times when we went on the attack, we were firing that 6-barreled minigun, and I was firing it from the front seat. We also had that 40-millimeter cannon, thumper, boom, 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 boom. And when our troops or Marines or Navy or even South Vietnamese were being attacked by enemy soldiers, we just went after them, firing pairs of rockets, firing the minigun, and firing that 40-millimeter cannon.
So most of it was combat support.
And checking a bunch of them off the planet. And then, as I had mentioned before, it was at the end of that 4 months when I went down, talked to the captain who ran the gun platoon, the Cobra gun platoon, and I said, when can I go off to Vung Tau for the transition so I can become a backseat aircraft commander? And he just screamed at me to get out. He says, you're just going to be a gunner co-pilot for the whole time. And it was at that time that I immediately went to visit Captain William Smith, who ran the scout platoon, and he took me immediately. And so that other 6.5 months of my flying was rolling up over 650 hours, mostly in the right seat of the OH-6. And I also ended up providing training to new scout pilots. Captain Smith made me the trainer for new scout observers and for new scout pilots, with my nickname of Rocket J Squirrel. He just said, hey, Rocket J, take this guy, throw him in the left seat, give him some training. Okay, sir, will do.
Your first wounding, were you hospitalized long at all, or at all for that? It didn't sound like.
Yeah, because it was a phosphorus round, I ended up just doing 3 days at that local, at that hospital that was just a few blocks away from where our compound was. Our compound at Dongtam was not on the flight line. It was in the middle of the camp, and just south of us was a Navy PX on the south side of our compound. On the west side was a POW compound, where there were a lot of enemy soldiers in this POW compound on the west side of our building. And another thing to share with you was that all of a sudden we would have incoming mortar rounds and rockets coming in, and everybody just ran out of those barracks and into that little, it was covered stacks of dirt in bags with a metal roof, and then more bags on top of that. And it was a protected area. Even when one round came down and hit that roof on that thing, it didn't go through and hurt any of us. We were all just hiding in that bunker. Nice bagged bunker. And as I said before, the major shoot down, which almost checked me off the planet, 10.5 months, but able to make it out of there alive, and able to make it back, to Fort Meade, Maryland, and then that follow-on assignment to Aberdeen Proving Ground for years, doing lots of flying and doing special test projects.
How did you feel about the anti-war movement?
The anti-war?
Movement.
Well, seeing so many of those demonstrations, while I was in war, I still felt that we were doing the right thing to try to help the South Vietnamese. Our fond desire, my desire, to help the South Vietnamese, to try to keep the Viet Cong and the NVA, the North Vietnamese, at bay. I felt that was appropriate. And I know that during that whole time frame, that we had that tremendous amount of the anti-war demonstrators, and in some cases where they're beating up people and doing other stupid things, and just was not a positive thing.
How about Jane Fonda? What are your feelings?
Hanoi Jane? Yeah, that's what we nicknamed her, Hanoi Jane Fonda, because she actually hopped in.
Yes.
And still having those poor Air Force gentlemen all in the prison in North Vietnam. Fortunately, a ship arrived, and they were able to get all of them out at one point. So that was a positive thing. I cannot say that I have any positive feelings about Jane Fonda.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Actually, just this past fall, or actually fall of last year, I hopped down to Washington, D.C. and hooked up with Mad Dog and Duck. Larry Duck Simpson and Mad Dog Swearingen, and William Smith, who was the captain running the scout platoon. I nicknamed him Bungalow Bill, from the old Beatles tune. Hey, Bungalow Bill, what did you kill? Bungalow Bill. He went out tiger hunting with his elephant and gun. In case of accidents, he always took his mom. And, hey, Bungalow Bill. Hey, Rocket J. So 30 years later, it was just terrific, hooking up with a whole bunch of enlisted, warrant officers, and commissioned officers, all of us just getting together and showing all of our old scrapbooks and all of those old pictures, you know, photos. There's a photo of me wearing my black cav hat with a big cigar in my mouth at the age of 20, and my arms like this. Cigar.
You ever join any veterans organizations?
I had, that was my fond desire to do it, to join, you know, some, and I was unable to do it for a bunch of years, but it was a couple of years ago that I joined the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and I'm an NRA member now, and in the side window of my little Toyota out there, I have that NRA sticker. And had made phone calls and chatted with a lot of different people, and ran into a lot of fellow NRA members, you know, just in local malls and things like that. So that was kind of fun.
How do you feel about your service time? How it affected your life?
My active military time. I felt that it was the fair and proper thing to do. I felt that it was the correct thing to do to try to help our South Vietnamese comrades, but also to share with you. I saved an Air Force guy. I saved a Navy guy. The Air Force guy, one day we're just flying along, and all of a sudden, I see this parachute come out of a jet because a rocket hit that Air Force jet, and I see the parachute coming down. And I called the Cobra. You know, I said, 19, there's a Air Force guy parachuting down into a rice paddy. And what I ended up doing was to check all 4 tree lines around there, because if there are enemy soldiers in there, then I had to check them off the planet before I went in and made a landing to try to get him. The stupid thing that he did, I land my OH-6, and I said, gave him a thumbs up, told him to come over towards the helicopter, but he picked up his parachute and he's holding it in his arms. And I went, throw away the chute, throw away the parachute. It's going to blow up into our rotor system and we're all going to check off the planet. He goes, oh. He unhooked it and just threw it away. And then he ran over. I said, duck down, because my rotor system is lower than others. He ducked down and he jumped in the back, put the headset on, and I took off, did a right 270, followed by a left 90, and just did my little magic tricks, you know, in case there are any enemy soldiers out there. And then called the Cobra and said, got an Air Force guy here, we're going to drop him off at the nearest facility. And on the way in, he said, hey, if you ever get up to Tonsanut, dinner and drinks are on me. I said, Captain, sir, I'm happy to help you out. We're going to drop you off at that nearest facility there, and there are Hueys that come through all the time, and one of them, I'm sure, will be hopping you back up to Tonsanut. And he said, and when we landed, he just pumped my hand and said, thank you for your help. Still alive. Okay, buddy. I pulled a Marine out who had several bullet holes in him on another occasion, and grabbed an Army guy who was unhurt, but he was running away from all of these enemy soldiers who were shooting at him. Rounds barely missing him. And I ended up with my OH-6 dropping down behind him, doing a 180 and just hitting that trigger and making that 6-barrel minigun, and checked off 7 enemy soldiers. Made them go away. And I did a 180, and he was hiding behind a rock. And, come on, I'll give you a ride. I sat down, he ran over, jumped in the back, and off we went, and got him back to his infantry guys. Yeah. Only one tour of duty in Vietnam, 10.5 months. One minor shoot-up, and then the second, that major shoot-down. And as I shared with you earlier, 1 week in the 3rd Field Hospital in Saigon, followed by that 2 weeks in Kamsama, Japan, followed by Fort Meade, Maryland for almost a month, and they finally got all the stitches removed, got me working again, and then Aberdeen.
Okay, one other thing. Could you hold this in front of you and tell us when that was taken?
Okay. How's that for a look?
Now, you were what rank there, and where was this? I wrote it on the bottom. You told us before. Where was it taken, and when? And
Yeah, that was taken
I think you said Rochester.
Rochester, New York. I had hopped over to the 98th Division. They were called the Iroquois Division. They actually had an Iroquois Indian on the badge. And yeah, they asked me to, just have my formal picture taken, so I had all of my awards and decorations on, and a rather short haircut at that point.
You said that was taken in '88. What rank were you at that time?
Major. Yeah. I made it up to Lieutenant Colonel with the 1062nd Reserve Training Unit, right here in Albany.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.